You're tuned into the hottest paranormal live show on YouTube, Into the Fringe, where we discuss lost civilizations, UFOs, cryptids, unsolved mysteries, megalithic structures, extraterrestrials, interdimensional portals, time skips, and more. Don't change that channel, because now you are leaving the mainstream and entering into the fringe.
Greetings, followers. It is I, Cardinal Sin. Welcome to Into the Fringe, number 18. And I am going to go ahead and vamp a little bit here, and we will get started. From 1992 to 2002, Christopher O'Brien investigated hundreds of unexplained events in Colorado's San Luis Valley. His investigative work is chronicled in his Mysterious Valley book trilogy, and this field investigation of UFOs, cattle mutilations, crypto creatures, haunted sites, etc., has produced one of the largest databases of unusual occurrences from a single geographic region. Today, he is monitoring a sophisticated multi-sensor surveillance setup called UFODAP in a groundbreaking effort to scientifically monitor ongoing anomalous activity in this remote region. O'Brien's work has been featured in over 90 TV show segments, including Ancient Aliens, Inside the Kitchen, Extra, Strange Evidence, and he co-produced the film It Could Happen Tomorrow, the winner of two 2012 EBE Film Festival awards. His latest book, Stalking the Herd, is considered to be the most comprehensive book ever written, addressing the complicated cattle mutilation mystery. Welcome, Christopher O'Brien, to Into the Fringe.
Thanks for having me, guys. Wow, kind of weird. Hearing all that stuff. Yeah, it's good to be here. I've been coping with my reality like everybody else for the past year, 15 months. It's been kind of rough, but I'm glad we're all coming back and hopefully to some sense of normalcy.
What a long, strange trip it's been, huh?
You think? I wouldn't want to be a teenager right now,
or a toddler even.
Imagine that. Well, a toddler maybe.
Can you imagine just coming into consciousness with all this going on?
No.
Having no foreknowledge of what it's really supposed to be like.
No. Well, true. Huh? Yeah, kindergarten kids. 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds. I mean,
it's pretty crazy.
Yeah.
Before we get started, I'd like to warn everyone in the chat or those watching later, this material may be unsuitable for some viewers, especially young people. This subject gets messy and can potentially be disturbing. While it is fascinating, it is grisly and not appropriate for all audiences. If you are queasy, young, have a heart condition, or are subject to fainting spells, please find another live stream to enjoy. You have been warned. Now, Chris, I understand at the end of the show, you're going to give away a copy of either Stalking the Herd or The Mysterious Valley.
Well, Secrets of the Mysterious Valley, right?
Secrets of the Mysterious Valley.
That's the big double volume.
Okay. Will these be autographed, personalized copies?
Yeah, of course.
Oh, awesome.
They could be annotated or just signed.
Cool. So, tell me, Chris, how did you become interested in UFOs, cattle mutes, crypto creatures, and the paranormal?
Because I was an experiencer, and I had a very interesting encounter, shall we say, with a number of non-human entities when I was either just turned 7 or was about to turn 7. and in Bellevue, Washington, and it changed my life. It was the single most memorable thing. I dove and got a line drive. It hit me in the mouth, knocked my teeth out. I threw the guy out at first in Little League. I remember that. I remember a couple really bad bicycle crashes, some really cool Christmases. Those are the things that the average kid, remembers in his life. But I'll tell you, that experience really, it changed me. I became completely fascinated with the things that the books and the adults weren't telling us. So that's kind of been a bit of a guiding philosophy for a long time, and for good reason. And it wasn't until I actually lived in a place that was an absolute paranormal Disneyland, major hotspot. That's when I really started getting into it. And, by that point, I'd read hundreds and hundreds of books. And I had a pretty good knowledge base from where to spring out into the field and actually start investigating cases, whether they be, claims of cattle mutilations or abductions or mass sightings, weird occult stuff. Oftentimes in the south end of the San Luis Valley where I was investigating, just predominantly Hispanic. I get called UFO sightings that were witches. They would report witches, and because that's in that tradition, when the witches wanted to go somewhere fast, they turned into a fireball and zipped around, above the desert. It's just fascinating when you really get into the subcultural slanting and the uniqueness of subcultural beliefs unto themselves. And you start to see the way different subcultural beliefs, the intersecting points where they overlap. You come up with some really interesting cultural phenomena as well. And the San Luis Valley is probably the classic, perfect test case for that particular, experiment, if you want. And that's what I did. I spent 10 years there, and really tried to work with scientists, worked with all the local law enforcement, worked with veterinary pathologists at the New York State Veterinary Hospital in college, at Cornell. Dr. W.C. Levengood was another scientific. I was part of the bovine excision site study that Levengood had, and in my case actually was singled out as the one of the more compelling ones. So anyway, in a nutshell, yeah, I spent 10 solid years, put 300,000 miles on my truck. I really went out in the field and did it, and I wouldn't change a thing. I met a lot of really cool people. I was only hoaxed or attempted to be hoaxed, to my knowledge, just a handful of times out of the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of reports that I had come my way. And I wish I'd had 3 of me, and I could have maybe put a dent in all the cases that I just didn't have time to I had too much going on. There was too much coming in. It was amazing.
Had a lot on your plate, huh?
Well, I did, yeah, back in the 90s when all this was going on, from like 90 to 2000. It was really hot and heavy out there.
I'm curious. This is the first I've heard of a personal experience. Do you feel comfortable telling us a little bit about it?
I've talked about it for years. Of course, I didn't I didn't really talk about it for many more years. But yeah, this is something that my family and I quizzed family members later to get their recollections, and it was interesting because they pretty much mirrored mine, but their interpretation was that I was, somehow having a nightmare and was sleepwalking. And even though I told them, look, I opened the back door, the kitchen door, and tried to run out and forgot that Pop put the screen door on, and I ran into the screen door and it bounced me back on my ass, and I had a bump on my head. Tell me I was, yeah, I'm sleepwalking, right? Yeah, this is a nightmare. No, it was real. It was real. And there were other cases in surrounding towns. I think that same spring, if I remember, John Keel in Operation Trojan Horse talks about some cases in Bellevue in 66, I think. That's what I figured it would be. This.
And what do you remember?
I remember everything. I've talked about it many times on the air.
I don't remember ever hearing about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is it a humanoid sighting, a landing, an abduction?
3.5 foot tall, impossibly skinny beings. I called them stick men, and they had these. I said they were light spears. So they were holding these rods. The three in the front were holding rods that had this glittering colored light going up and down it really fast inside this rod that he held out in front of him like a guard at a palace or something. It was weird. And then there were three in the front, and then there was one in the back who didn't have anything and was taller and seemed to be kind of hiding behind the other ones. It's the only way I can describe it. And I woke up. They were around my bed. I wasn't paralyzed or anything. The first thing I did was pinch myself, cover my head up with my covers, and pinch myself. And then I pulled the covers down, and they had first been beside my bed, and then they had moved further into the room at the foot of my bed. Well, right opposite me to the left was the doorway to go upstairs. I had the split level house. I was in the kind of like the ground floor, the basement. And so I dashed out of my door, made the turn, ran up the 10 stairs to the landing of where the front door was, and whipped around to run up the other 4 stairs. I went up to my parents' room, and they were standing there waiting for me, or it was another group. I don't know.
Wow.
But there they were, and I had no choice but to run through the kitchen. My mother had pinned ivy so that our entire ceiling of our kitchen was covered in ivy, which I remember when I tried to go out the door and bang, I ran into the door and knocked myself back. I looked to the end of the hall, through the kitchen to the entrance hallway, and they came through, and there was something. I remember the light from the spear thing seemed to kaleidoscopes because of all the ivy on the ceiling in the kitchen. And I don't really remember why, but I ended up running down our driveway, going through the hedge to go to our next door neighbors, the Richards, and I was going to bang on their door and call my parents. And so my brother and I had a secret passage through this big laurel hedge, and I ran through and then climbed up the 3 layers. They had 3, they were kind of up on a little hill. And I went up there, banged on the door, nobody answered. Went to the next neighbors, the Barkers. They had a huge lawn, probably 50, 60 feet by 40 feet. And the Richards, the first neighbors, they had a street light, like a farm light, lighting up their driveway. And so I stood out in the middle of the Barkers' lawn, and I waited for them to come because they were following me. and I knew they were.
Mm-hmm.
And so I waited out there, and for them to come into the light. So I was about 40 feet away, maybe 30. So I was close enough, when they approached the light on the ground, the circle of light, and the only way I can describe it is they turned sideways, and they had no depth, and they came through the light at me, through the street light, like pencils, like long, skinny, like lines,
like two-dimensional creatures.
Yeah, they were like two-dimensional. At least that's what it looked like under the light. Now at that point, I became absolutely terrified. I went to the Parkers, banged on the door. I remember the light coming on the porch, and then I think it was longer. My sister says 20 minutes later, the Barkers called her, said, your little brother's out here.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know where he went. And so she found me like 3, 4, 5 houses away, like 1, 2, 3 houses over, and then one house down, out on their deck. And she had been running around. I think she looked longer, but what do I know? And then I was so traumatized when she took me back home. I refused to, go downstairs to my bedroom. No way. And so she says, okay, you can sleep with me. And she was like getting ready to go off to college. She was 18, and she was just kind of mothering me.
And how old were you at this point?
6 and a half, maybe almost 7.
Mm-hmm.
It was like the spring. My birthday is March 24th. It was probably like, late February into March, because it wasn't that cold out.
Mm-hmm.
So, but she said I tried to nurse her when I was sleeping with her, which I thought was an incredibly, I was rocked on an archetypal level to go, to revert back to that sort of
fetal position.
Yeah, exactly. It was weird. It's not something that you forget.
Yeah.
I remember every detail, and I always have.
So did they get close enough to touch you? Do you have missing time?
I don't know. I don't know, and I don't want to find out.
Don't want to know. Yeah.
No, I don't want to know. No. All I know is that was the single most important thing that happened to me in the first 7 years of my life, without question, besides being born.
Right.
Well, anyway, that's a whole different story.
Okay. Well, thanks for telling us that.
Yeah. Well, hey, transparency. I have to admit that I have seen dozens and dozens of UFOs, and I have had 6 hours of missing time out in the some of the most bizarre terrain on Earth, out in South Central Utah, where I hunt for dinosaur fossils.
Mm-hmm.
That's otherworldly out there, boy. But then that's another story. I mean, when I was racing around, people calling me, say, go outside, it's coming your way. When you get a network of skywatchers going and everybody working together, it's pretty amazing. If we had the technology back then that we got now, that's why UFODAP is so important. We really need to establish civilian-derived scientific data that documents bona fide, sightings, events of AAOs, anomalous aerial objects, or unidentified aerial phenomena, UAPs, or unidentified flying objects. It's all the same thing, with variations, obviously, on the theme. But it's important that we get scientific data that we can then study and have, the powers of real, world-class diagnostic science let loose on the on the equation. We're starting to lose the stigma on the subject, and things are loosening up. And I think it's UFODAP and Sky Hub and some of the other efforts out there for civilian researchers to become part of a net, and let's see if we can get the data to overwhelm the mystery.
Yeah. What is the UFO data acquisition project?
It's a customized system that you can get at very low cost. That has 30 times optical zoom cameras, everything from blaze gratings that will break the light at night into light spectra. We have instruments, detection instruments that range from magnetometers or accelerometers. We have gravimeters to look for changes in gravity. And a complete environmental package, of course. A radio frequency spectrum analyzer that's sweepable, that'll go up and down the bands and nail any particular anomalous data that happens to be produced by an object or whatever. This stuff can be monitored, and we've been, with the help of some really cool AI programs, we've been helping train the equipment to discriminate between particular objects and identify everything in the frame. Basically, everything is like there's a heads-up display, and everything that's there has a name, whether it's tree, bush, fence. Everything is and anything that doesn't fit into the to the normal visual activity that you see is going to go into an unknown file. That file will then be the principals of the system will be sent emails to let them know that they have an anomalous set of data, and they should check it out. And each system is devised and customized for the particular person or group's needs. They can be portable systems that can be taken pretty much anywhere. They can be fixed systems that only have a certain view, and you don't need the view behind you, let's say. So it all depends on what your setup is going to entail in terms of how you're actually covering the area optically. Of course, the instruments will cover them regardless, but for optical stuff, which is that's the sexy stuff, good video, it's hard to come by. And I can't wait to get video with 3 cameras. We do triangulated systems as well, because you get triangulated visual data. It's amazing how much you can scientifically determine. Plus, GPS is involved. All these events will be plotted, through Google Maps and with GPS. And, Ron Olsch, the engineer who designed the software that operates these systems, is a genius. He worked for Disney. He's a computer scientist and engineer.
Yeah, I saw his video on your YouTube channel today, about 28 minutes long.
Yeah, it was a little lengthy, but that was the first time he'd ever been on camera.
Really? He looked very comfortable on camera, and
he's an
really gave some great information.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, how did you become a field investigator and researcher, and what approach do you take?
I started out, I was going to write an article, for my little local newspaper. They had circulation of about 300. And it's pretty bizarre what happened on December 9th, 1992. We had 2 huge 100-foot ovals came down out of the mountains right behind Crestone, the Sangre de Cristos. There's 14ers, 3 of them right there. and then a whole line going north and south. And they came up and over the mountains from the military operations area, the Levita low-level flight operations area. But they came down and went over the town and flew out into the valley, following the line of trees in the creek. And then they hovered over some trees for a while, right by a person's house. And then one of them took off to the west and one took off to the south. And I found 18 people that saw it in the town. I a couple of weeks later, I wasn't there. I didn't see it. I was out gigging with my country band.
Right.
Yeah. So I didn't see it, darn. But I know, a bunch of people that did. But I didn't really, I thought, yeah, right. It sounded too good to be true, And so I didn't really pay that much attention to it. But I had a New Year's Eve party, and almost everybody at the party had seen these lights, these huge ovals. And then somebody else said, oh, that was the night they had a cattle mutilation down in Costilla County. And I tell you, that's when I really started nibbling the bait. And I had 2 weeks before my article was supposed to go into the Crestone Eagle. And, I was only supposed to have 500 words, and I had 1,500. and she ran the whole thing, whole front page.
Really?
Thing. Yeah. And it got picked up by the wire services,
Wow.
Reuters, Associated Press, UPI, the Lou Farish's UFO clipping service.
Is this still available on your website or anything?
I'm sure it's there somewhere. It's got to be. No, maybe not. I don't know. It's
It sounds like it would be really interesting to read the early work of Christopher O'Brien.
Yeah. Well, that would be it right there. That's the beginning of my official investigation, which would have been 92, 93. And I did a series of articles for the next over the next 5-6 years. There was some amazing activity that happened, and of course, I'm writing everything down, and I immediately turned to the best in the biz. I very quickly found out who I needed to call, who I needed to present myself to, and the kinds of skills that I needed to really have quickly. So one of my first calls was to Linda Moulton, and she was absolutely a sweetheart. Mm-hmm. She said, "This is how you do it." She's a very good interviewer. You can say what you will about Linda, and lots of people do, and so do I. But she is very good with people, and
she's an Emmy winner.
Yeah, well, yeah, a regional Emmy, but
sure.
Anyway, so Linda was very nice, and I, of course, gave her first dibs on all my cattle cases for the next 5 years. But then we had a falling out. Yeah, but that's
neither here nor there.
That's the real story.
Yeah.
Right. Doesn't matter. Linda is a very talented person, and it's amazing that she's going so strong at 76. So, more power to her. She's a real. That was really tough, what she went through in the early 80s. It was.
Yeah, when NBC pulled the rug out from under her.
HBO, I mean.
HBO, yeah. Yeah. And she was promised some real footage by the government, as I recall.
Yeah. Yeah, so was Robert Emenhager and Jamie Chandier. It's a reoccurring theme that happens. I think it's different now. I'm really starting to look forward to see how the intelligence community is going to spin and try to regain control of the narrative and the conversation about UFOs. Mm-hmm. So it'll be really, really fun to watch.
And to kind of riff on that a little bit, what do you think we're gonna get from the June 1st, government info dump? Are we gonna get anything that we don't already know? Do we know as much as they know? What do you expect to happen?
Much ado about nothing. I think they're going to release a bunch of stuff that's just been hanging around that doesn't really need to be classified.
Mm-hmm.
They're probably going to include a couple of tantalizing little bits to keep stringing everybody along so that they can, play the cart and the horse, or, the carrot and the donkey, or, however you want to, whatever analogy you want to use. It's all about control. Governments are about control, and in order to control the narrative, control the whole belief system around these objects, there's some very talented individuals that have probably figured out a way to manipulate that so that they become ahead of the subject. They catch up and become ahead of it, rather. And they also have, control of the narrative. They're dictating how things are being questioned. It's all, that's what governments are about, societal control.
So you expect it to be just kind of more of the same?
It's going to continue unfolding like it has. The very fact that David Fravor, the F-16 pilot off the Nimitz, and his wingman, who was a woman named Alex, I forget her last name, but she's still serving in the Navy.
Mm-hmm.
And I find it very interesting that she was allowed to go in her flight suit, if I remember, and talk to CBS. I found that very interesting. I can't think of another time in history where a woman pilot has even been interviewed about UFOs. I'm sure there's some historians out there that could say, "Oh no, I know this one, that one," but it's pretty rare. And then, but to have a Navy, one of our top, Navy pilots are badass, man. You try to land 30-ton aircraft on a pitching deck of a, you gotta have.
And they do it every time.
Yeah, they do, and you can tell when you're flying if the guy's an Air Force, vet or a Navy vet. The Navy vets just, they just collide right in. It's boom. You hit the ground on the flights with the Air Force captain.
It's funny that you mention that the Navy, because when that article hit Politico and the New York Times on, I believe it was December 17th of 2017, when that information came out and the videos came out, nobody seemed to bat an eye. It was no big deal.
Well, because it had already been released back in 2006.
Sure.
It was like...
But I mean, when something's above the fold in the New York Times, people take notice.
Yeah. Well...
Or at least they used to.
Yeah, you have to... that gets into the whole Leslie Kean and Ralph Blumenthal aspect of this, and how
you have to manage your expectations.
Yeah, I think that they actually were going to go with even more than what they were allowed to go with. I think there's been a lot of pressure building up in the culture for some, all the old Cold Warriors are gone. Mm-hmm. The guys that were really enfranchised by the truth embargo.
Yeah.
All those guys they're gone. Either that or they're retired and really old. And it's a whole younger group of autocrats and some cases fascists. Let's call it what it is.
Yeah.
It doesn't really. It's not that big of a deal to them because they know, it doesn't matter what you do. It's always going to be one step ahead of you. It's like the ultimate technological trickster that you'll just never be able to catch.
Mm-hmm.
And we can't tell if it's good or bad, or are they demons? Are they angels? Are they jinn? What are they?
Yeah.
So I think that there's a lot up in the air right now. You have a melting pot of cultures. My book, Stalking the Tricksters, goes into this whole idea of how certain archetypes resonate through culture and subcultures. And there's Carl Jung was the one that pretty much defined the archetypal system, which is the shadow, the mandala, the mother, the child, the king, the god, the goddess. These are, every culture has these symbols within it.
Mm-hmm.
And the oldest one that actually has a face is the trickster. The trickster is after the mother and child, and there's the trickster. So
I was going to ask you, who or what is the trickster, and what is the connection to animal mutilations?
Just the there's a number of things. The predilection for taking sexual organs is a trickster in many cultures does that. So that's, I think, the most direct possible linkage. But if you look at the actual, in its totality, the mystery, everyone is different. You can, even though they all seem the same, everyone is different. And there seems to be something real at the core of it, and it's surrounded by copycat type cases or cases that are using the being
visage.
alarmed and responding to the core cases. There's something that's trying to figure out why they're doing it. Mm-hmm. Sort of like a defensive posture. There's got to be a minimum of 3 or 4 different groups, for lack of a better term. I hate to sound so conspiratorial, but really, if you look at the totality of the evidence that we have, all the helicopters, all the weird lights at night, that people often equate with UFOs, proximity to uranium and nuclear power and missile sites, and Malmstrom Air Force Base. Among the missiles, they had mutilations, with it inside the fence.
Wow.
So, there's always been this underappreciation of the theatricality behind the manifestation of these deaths. Mm-hmm. And I'm the first one to admit that there's a sizable percentage of cases that the average person thinks is a mutilation is not. It's just unusual scavenger action. Mm-hmm. And the fact that animals won't touch, scavengers and predators won't touch mutilations, for instance. They won't touch other cattle either if they've died of poison plants or died of drinking bad water. The scavengers know that, and they don't generally, except maybe pick out the eyes, that sort of thing, some soft tissue stuff. But again, what am I? I'm not a veterinary pathologist. I've been very fortunate because I've been caught up in this weird ass subject. which is my least favorite thing to do in life, is to go out on a cattle mutilation investigation. I can't believe I did so many. I used to have to bring a bottle of Vicks and put under my nose.
Oh, I imagine. Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of these were in the summer, in a real arid, semi-arid environment at 7,000, 8,000 feet.
I'm showing a picture of Lady.
That's the first one.
Or Snippy the horse.
Snippy the horse.
And is this a what we would call a standard or a true mutilation?
Yeah, it was extremely high strange. I probably know more about that case than anyone living.
Really?
Yeah, it happened 30 miles from where I lived in San Luis Valley. I knew about Snippy back when I was 10, when I saw the Inquirer and saying flying saucers killed my horse. I'll never forget that.
Flying saucers killed my horse.
Yeah, that was the headline.
Huh.
So, yeah, Snippy was the real thing. The reason why it's considered the first, I have cases of hundreds of sheep mutilations back in the early 1600s in England that I can document. There's cases in the 17th and 18th centuries that, people like Charles Fort and John Keel and others, researchers have uncovered some cases from the 20s in Australia. There are cases in, I think, Canada.
I was actually going to ask you, when was the first animal mutilation in North America, the first documented classic, or true unexplained death in North America that was documented?
Well, the only one that, to my knowledge, that had a future pathologist and hematologist do a quick examination of the body within hours of its death. That's pretty significant in and of itself. The other part of the story is pretty bizarre. The doctor later in life claimed that he had been abducted. He had been camped out in the dune field at the Great Sand Dunes, and he claimed that he had been visited and possibly abducted. And he was so freaked out, and then he stumbled out, and I forget how long he was up there, but I think it was the next morning. It was still dark because they had to have the lights of the cars on to light the scene, but he did an examination of Snippy, and he swore he'd never go back to the valley ever again.
And this was in 1967?
Yeah, Dr. John Altshuler. And I convinced him to come down for a visit, and he came down with Timothy Good, the researcher from England.
Sure.
They flew down in John's plane, and they landed, and they picked my brother and I up, and so we went up, and I'm taking him around, showing him all the sights and everything. And we get over the dry lakes, and I said, this place right here, it's pretty funny. Compasses spin and other weird kind of, possibly geomantic kind of field effects are going on. Mm-hmm. And he goes, oh, that's interesting. And everything seemed normal. And he gets on the, he's lining up for his approach to Bergman Field in Alamosa. He's on the very outside of the approach. And he goes, here, this is so-and-so, such and such, requesting permission to land. And he waited, and he said it again. He started clicking his radios. He said it again. And he said, oh, well, I think my brother said, he's probably off taking a leak or something,
Mm.
And so we land and we start taxiing over towards the, where you pick up the passengers and stuff. And there's a guy running at us, waving his arms, and then boom, right behind us, a plane lands. We had just gotten out of the
Like
way.
right out of an Alfred Hitchcock movie.
Oh man, I'll tell you, Altshuler, he went white as a ghost. The guy says, "You mother, what are you doing?" I said, "Peel off," and we all said, "No." He called 2-3 times and nobody answered. And the guy says, "I heard you," and he says, "I was telling you, do not land. You do not have permission to land."
What was going on with him?
Well, he never came back to the valley. That was he never forgave me for that.
Did he ever tell you why? Why he said that?
He just didn't. He didn't like it down there. He's just every time he said, "Every time I've been down here, some weird, spooky ass
Weird shit goes on." Yeah.
Yeah. Some people just they draw that to them. I'll bet you if you take there's somebody, if you take them to some of the places that I'm aware of in the valley, that they might trigger something off. Or
oh man, don't take me. I'm a sensitive. I've uncovered all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
I've been a researcher myself, and I don't know if I told you about my most recent sighting, but the thing that occurred to me afterward was how absurd it was.
Yeah.
I'm coming home from the grocery store. I've got a bag of groceries, one in each arm. It's nighttime. I look up, and there are these two what I thought were planes, because I thought I saw an FAA light on one of them, but they were far bigger than planes, and they were moving from the south to the west in this motion like lovebirds. They would start with an arc and then go toward each other and then go incredibly close to each other and then separate away and then do that 3 or 4 times. And I couldn't get my phone to take a photograph, and nothing would have come out anyway, so I just sat there and absorbed it. And they were huge, and they were metal, and no airplanes in an air show would ever dare get as close to them as they did to each other. And then when I thought about it later afterward, I thought, they just put on a display for me, for one person. That's absurd. and before that, I've had really, really weird helicopter activity, which I'll get into probably a little bit later. You're also a Bigfoot researcher. Can you tell us about your research, what you found, and programs that you've been on in relation to Bigfoot?
Yeah. I grew up in Washington State, in Medina, and I've just been fascinated since I was a little kid in the local legends. I remember 5-6 years old knowing about them. My grandfather actually was involved in my adopted grandfather, I should say, was involved in peripherally in a case in Grays Harbor, Washington in 1918. And I guess a silver Bigfoot, an old one, raided this woman's salt fish operation, where she would brine fish in big barrels. And this thing was pulling them out and chowing down on her salted fish. And so she, I'm not sure how she got word to the sheriff. I think somebody had a phone fairly close by, and the sheriff got called and went down there. And my grandfather heard about the commotion, went to the sheriff's office, and they told him what had happened. And so he he went down after them, so he didn't see what happened. But evidently, when the sheriff got there, they confronted this thing and just fired shots above it to scare it off, and they scared it off. And then by the time my grandfather got there, he the only thing he saw, well, the smell, and also the all the footprints. So, I mean, you hear that, here's something like that, or you're a little kid, you get impressed.
Sure.
So, we built a house in 1970 down by next to the Medina School, like a spec house. And the lead contractor's name was Otis Wetstein. And he was Roger Patterson's best friend when they were growing up in Spokane.
No kidding.
Yeah. And he knew Roger went to the same church, the whole deal. Mm-hmm. They were like really, really close. And he said, and I can almost quote him word for word, Roger Patterson is the least likely person to try to hoax something. He said he's honest as the day is long, And so people that say the Patterson film was a hoax, his best friend believed him.
Well, and when you see the film that's been upgraded to HD,
right,
you can see the muscles rippling underneath the fur.
I don't know.
I mean, there's just no question about it.
Yeah.
According to your website, quote, the Hopi elders say that the increasing appearances of Bigfoot are not only a message or a warning to the individuals or communities to whom he appears, but to humankind at large. They see Bigfoot as a messenger who appears in evil times, as a warning from the Creator that man's disrespect for his sacred instructions has upset the harmony and balance of existence. To the Hopi, the big hairy man is just one form that messenger can take. What do you think that means?
Well, I think it's like the ebb and flowing of synchronicity, anomalous weather, weird cultural events. There seems to be, it's a choreographed dance of different aspects and elements that are constantly sort of trying to be entrained with each other. And when things start to get out of balance, the Hopi call it Kayana which
life out of balance.
Right, and that's what happens. Their analogy is if you ever stirred up a red ant's nest, one of the ant hills, and stirred it up, and you see all of a sudden the ants start to boil. That's the ant dance, and that's where we're at right now. And the things that are tied into Gaia, the things that probably have something to do with the superorganism that
we live on.
Well, I mean, for tens of thousands of years, that's what was worshipped as the deity, the mother. So anything that is connected to that, whether it be the little people, what few are left, the jinn, the coppers,
the fae folk,
the fae, Bigfoot. You could go down the line of things that appear to be connected to some sort of Gaian, I don't know, what's called whole earth science, So because we're in that period right now of the trickster, I mean, Donald Trump, there was the trickster run amok in our in our culture. I mean, the guy was a perfect example of like the reflection of a trickster. Totally amoral, doesn't know what he's doing, doesn't know why he's doing it.
Doesn't know where he is.
Wants to topple, knock things over like a little kid in building blocks. He wants to knock things over. And what happens when somebody like that comes in? There's a big gap that opens up for creativity. And so, we're headed into a period where we're going to have a lot of very creative creative work, I think, being done.
Well, if I can use that to segue the creative aspect, what are your thoughts on paranormal Bigfoot as opposed to an undiscovered primate population?
In 1973, if I remember correctly, my brother was riding horseback up just below Stevens Pass in between Startup and Gobar, Washington, way up in the Cascades, and they were walking. You know how it is there. It's it's never dry. It's a temperate rainforest, and there was a logging road that had been cut through behind the group home where he was living, and he was riding with a couple of other people up on the logging road, and they were coming to a corner that turned to the left, and the horses started to freak out and started getting jittery, and then they smelled a foul smell. They got off the horses, and it took a little bit of doing, but they were willing to be led around the corner, and they got there and they saw 4 footprints. There were no footprints approaching the road. There were no footprints from the 4.5, 5 foot cliff where the creature had climbed up the cliff face, in the mud and slipped and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The print in the middle of the logging road was done in compact wet clay and left the fingerprint of the foot.
The dermal ridges.
The dermal ridges were all in the footprint, and the next one, the grass on the side of the road, the grass was still coming up out of the print from where it stepped on the grass, and then he did one big swooping print, broke a big pine bough, which was about probably 12 feet up. It got cracked, and then he pulled himself on to the top, and nothing. No other tracks.
So you tend to believe the paranormal Bigfoot angle?
I think what are UFOs? Are they real or are they paranormal? I think all this stuff is that same way, that it's both.
Well, the thing I find interesting is that the UFO crowd wants to keep your Bigfoot out of my UFOs, and the Bigfoot people want to keep your UFOs out of my Bigfoot. And there's been 1 or 2 books written about the overlap.
Don't tell Stan Gordon that, because he's got one of the coolest cases I've ever heard of. That's absolutely links the two. And he personally investigated the case and was there shortly thereafter. I think the next day he was there, or he may have been there that night. I forget. But he was there very, very soon post. And you're dealing with farmers and ranchers in a lot of these cases. These people have absolutely no reason to unleash a media frenzy on their lives.
Yeah.
They're private people. The reason why they live where they live is because they want elbow room. They want to, keep to themselves.
Space to live.
They don't want to rock the boat. They just want to, get out and get her done. And, now people say, well, mutilations, they haven't happened. It's like they're happening all the time. We've just had, in the last 2 years, we've had, 14 in Oregon, which is highly unusual. Anyway, we could be extrapolating all over the place with some of the theorizing that David Perkins and myself are doing. For the follow-up book, The Stalking the Herd, we're going to do an analysis of all the data in the first book, and then we're going to do a whole book analyzing the totality be intellectually honest and admit the data that has provenance. Don't just ignore it and think aliens have got to be the answer. Anything else is muddying the waters.
Right.
So I think it's really important to try to be as objective and as use a sense of equity when you're studying these topics. Too many people get tied up in the sensationalism and the cachet and the sexiness of the subject that is there. It's just not, a lot of dilettantes. People that don't read enough books, don't read any books. What am I saying? You talk to Perkins or myself. I don't know how many thousands of books we've read between the two of us.
Oh God.
I've got a pile of 10 books that I've already read, and then I think 3 more that I'm getting ready to read. It's important to expand your knowledge base and find people that you can trust, people that have a certain standard, investigative standard. Hell, even a journalistic standard, is pretty good. And then really go after some aspect of the thing that pulls you in. This whole thing pulled me in.
Sure.
It's almost like I didn't have any choice. When you have a front page article in your little town newspaper, and within 2 months you're on national television, it's bizarre. Only in America.
Only in America.
And the case that was in the bovine incision site study, the one that was the notable case, not only do I have the complete documentation of me gathering all the plant and soil and forensic samples, but it was done by the BBC.
Oh, that's right. I'd forgotten about that.
The BBC documented my excision site study case that I submitted to Levengood, and it's just the implications of it are pretty amazing.
It is kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah. Oh, it's so funny though. I did a transcript of what the English guys were saying around the dead cow, and I published it in my Enter the Valley book. I actually got the BBC to sign off on it so I could include it.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it took 3 months.
Back when they would have done that.
It took 3 months. As soon as I got that, it went in the package on the way to the publisher.
Wow.
I did it.
So what is a classic or true unexplained livestock death? And what are some of the earmarks of cases that are truly high strangeness?
A classic mutilation can be defined as a cow, usually a cow, although bulls recently have been the target. But it's a head of cattle that's found with dead for no apparent reason. There's no obvious cause of death. And the animal is generally missing with what appears to be surgical precision, somebody taking away the genitalia on the bull, reaming out the reproductive organs on the cow, removing the udder oftentimes, taking a square or a circle of hide for no apparent reason, not breaking into the thin membrane below the skin, which is very difficult to do surgically. And
just like the dermis?
Yeah, just the dermis is taken out.
Huh.
And leaving the underlying meat and bones and stuff encompassed in that film that you see right. At the butcher shop. It's just it's highly proficient. No, I'm describing a real one here.
Mm-hmm.
If you cut into its meat and the meat is pink, light pink or gray, the animal has been drained of blood. If
Completely exsanguinated.
Well, down almost to a capillary level, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Oftentimes an ear is gone, the upside eye, and these are all upside organs, which
Mm-hmm.
are also ones that predators and scavengers go after as well, which makes it difficult for the average person to tell the difference between the two. So the thing that is the telltale sign is the jawbone, all the skin excised around the jawbone and then up and around, taking the lips and everything. And then the jawbone is smooth and white. There's no meat on it. It's like it's polished
Mm-hmm.
in a real case.
Like it's bleached.
Yeah, exactly. And, we're talking about animals that were discovered just a day later. And Snippy was like that. The entire thing looked like it had been in the sun for 30 years when they
Mm-hmm.
first found it. So generally, scavengers won't go near it.
Mm-hmm.
You're not going to find any apparent blood anywhere.
Not
no
a single drop.
Sometimes, yeah. In my weirdest case, every bit of blood was taken from the animal.
Mm-hmm.
No question.
Which suggests that the exsanguination took place off-site, correct? Or implies that?
It does. It does. I mean, these things are definitely being. I think a few are done by ground teams, but depending on where they're located. But most of them are done, I think, taking the animals somewhere and then returning them in a different part of the pasture, so it appears that there's no tracks.
Mm-hmm. And what are the main theories that have been used to explain these bizarre animal deaths?
Well, again, Linda Howe's made a 40-year career on claiming it's aliens.
Mm-hmm.
And there is a sizable amount of reports that appear to be unconventional craft lit up at night, being seen in conjunction with cases. In the Ellsbury cases in Missouri, I think 73, maybe 75, there were this big orange light that was seen close to the ground. And that's something that's been fairly consistent, is seeing a dull orangish red light that appears to be flying around in the pasture. Some of the cases that happened up in Montana have some pretty interesting UFO activity. There's only a couple that I know of where actual entities have been seen in conjunction with a cattle mutilation.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there's the two famous abductees, Judy Doherty, 70. It was Myrna Hance, I think, in 73, and Judy Doherty in 1980. They both claim that they were taken aboard a ship, and I think there was a calf next to Judy, and they were mutilating it. I forget what Myrna said. First, she said that they're taking aboard a cat. A cat? You mean a calf? Oh yeah, a calf. I'm not as sure about her account, but it's way back there now. This is 73, and this is not something that you would find anywhere in the literature at this time. So, who knows? I really do think that there's something truly paranormal or alien, if you will, at the core of this phenomenon. Right. And it's a very small percentage of cases. Just and usually it's the first one or two cases that seem to be the high strange ones. And then all the ones that happen later tend to, the further along it goes, the sloppier they tend to look like. And lots of helicopter reports in areas, that sort of thing. So there's a pattern to it, which I kind of point out in Stalking the Herd, which is
Right.
the only truly comprehensive, objective book about cattle mutilations. There is nothing even close.
Well, yeah, I can vouch for that. Taking kind of a right turn here, how many haunted sites have you investigated, and what conclusions has it led you to?
Oh, good question. Wow, I've been to a bunch. When I lived in Sedona, I began a work relationship with Ron James, who is now the head of MUFON TV. And he shot a conference I was doing in Sedona, and he and his assistant came and attempted to document the event. And that's how I met him. And for the next 12, 15 years off and on, we, the first 5 years, I worked for him every day. And then I started doing more project-oriented stuff with him. And where was I going with that?
Haunted sites of investigation.
Oh, right, of course. Oh my God, Ron, he loves ghost hunting. And this is back in 2004 and 2005, before Ghost Hunters.
Before the craze of shows.
Yeah, exactly.
Faked hauntings.
He actually came up with some of the early ways to present EVPs and stuff. We worked with Michael Esposito, who's like arguably, he's my top EVP expert. Really cool guy, electronic musician, used to do acoustic psychology for the Army and stuff.
Wow.
He knows his stuff. So we went, and Amy Allen, remember her from Dead Files? We went to a bunch of places with her, and then Kelly Kanya we went with, and Robbie Thomas was another. But we went to a bunch of places around Chicago. We went over to the Studebaker Mansion, I think, in South Dakota.
I actually was on a ghost tour in Chicago.
Yeah?
Yeah, took a little bus and saw where John Dillinger got killed, and went to a couple of Irish pubs that were supposedly haunted. That was fun. Cool.
Well, he put together a couple of documentaries, and I was a sound man and auxiliary cameraman. And we did a bunch of trips. We did the Sally House in Kansas. We did. We were able to get into this was creepy, into the memorial park for the Murrah building in Oklahoma City. And it was really not cool that we did it, but hey, it wasn't my call.
Yeah.
So we went in and we conducted an EVP session, and we
brought home the bacon, huh?
Yeah, we never could have used it.
Mm-hmm.
We just wanted to see what was there, and we got, it's clear as a bell, little kids screaming, and it's pretty wild. I think if people really were able to even imagine that it's possible that you'd be able to record some sort of disembodied, whatever it is, source, Um, I you know, I mean, they got EVPs. I think in some of their earliest field recordings, like in 1906, they went to Siberia to the Altai, and they were recording these old Altai Siberian shaman doing these rituals, and they recorded them on this cylinder, the wax cylinder disc,
Edison cylinder.
Edison cylinder disc, and they brought them back to the American Museum of Natural History. Or I'm pretty sure that's who was doing them, and maybe some French place or French group or something as well. But they brought them back to New York, and they were listening to them, and they, in between the chanting, they would hear these like disembodied voices that they couldn't identify, and they had been there, and they know that nobody was talking, nobody was whispering. It's just weird. Michael really has studied the. I think he's even seen the original recordings, but
Wow.
he's a follower of Rodiv and all these Michael von Haaswolf and some pretty highfalutin acoustics people. He's the kind of guy that I would definitely take with me. And almost every haunted site investigation I've done Michael has been there. So I mean, you want me to list off all the places?
Just ones that stand out, and especially what conclusions that all they've led you to make.
Rick O'Dee's was cool because that's Al Capone's bordello and his weekend house for him and his guys. It was down off the Chicago River in Willowbrook, I think. And it was a restaurant when we went there called Rick O'Dee's, and we got every EVP we got was a curse word, and we were we were trying to do a pilot for a TV show, and how ironic that every single word that you can get on your EVPs and good recordings too are all like fuck yous and
totally unusable for your purposes.
You have to beep them out. It's just the irony, talk about the trickster. Jesus. And then we went to Mantino State Asylum. It used to be, I think, 1,200 buildings, and there was only about 5 or 6 left. And it was like condensed cream of ghost soup. It was just the silence roared in that place. And we had some pretty interesting occurrences that happened, that we captured on film. And whatever. When I started out, I thought, this is dumb, but hell, I'm going to these cool places. I'm getting paid. It was happening, so I did it. And man, after about the second place that we did, I was starting to, start to change my mind.
Yeah.
I lived in a haunted house. What am I saying? In Crestone, the very first place that I lived in when I moved to the San Luis Valley. Yeah. Mr. Douglas.
So let me ask you, what prompted Lawrence Rockefeller to fund your work in the late 1990s?
I got to be one-on-one with him for an afternoon, evening, and a morning and afternoon. Pretty much a weekend one-on-one with him. It was great. He's a really nice guy, really sweetheart.
Can you give us any details?
He's just fascinating. For an old guy, he's 89. It's kind of funny the way it happened. I lived a couple of houses away from the wife of the Attorney General for the Environment for the UN, or not. It's an undersecretary, rather, for the Environment for the UN, Maurice Strong, and his wife Hannah had a house just on the other side of the creek from me. And Hannah was the matriarch of the community. You know, she gave away all this land to all these religious groups, and her husband used to own the Baca Ranch. And I mean, it's a really interesting story. But man, I keep doing that, just fading out. I'm pretty tired.
Yeah, me too.
No, what?
Lawrence Rockefeller.
Oh, right, of course. Uncle Larry. Anyway, Hannah called. She said, "Get over here. You know, whatever you're doing, it's not as important as what you're going to be doing. Get over here." She'd never done this before, and it was like 10 in the morning. And so I grabbed, you know, a bunch of files and stuff and pictures, and you know, put on some decent looking clothes and ran out the door, you know, and went over there right away. And as I get there, John Mack is leaving with this guy named Sequoia. And Hannah saying goodbye to them. And she goes, "Oh, this is Chris." And she introduced me. And he says, "Oh, I'm sorry. I would have liked to have spoken with you, more. Would like to talk to you more, but I got to go catch a plane." So he took
this
off.
Is John Mack or
John
Rockefeller?
Mack.
Okay.
No, John Mack. And so I'm thinking, oh man, I blew my chance to sit down with John Mack. You know, I was really bummed. And Hannah says, "No, come on in." And so I walk in. There's Lawrence standing there. And I spent the rest of the day and through the evening, had dinner, and then came back the next morning and we talked about. He quizzed me mostly. What I thought about this, what I thought about that. But I was able to kind of turn the table on him a little bit. And I could tell just by his questions where his interests were. I didn't know, but he had a degree, I think, in philosophy from Princeton. The only one of the brothers that actually made any money off his inheritance. So anyway, I got to find out what it was like, running helping run the occupation during the aftermath of the Second World War. The family's, his grandfather's fascination with selective breeding and eugenics. We talked about that a little bit. This is after, he quizzed me on crop circles and asking me, what about this person? What about that person? And I almost felt like I was giving him an intelligence dump, But it was cool, man. I couldn't believe it, So anyway, it ended kind of weird. The very fact that he asked me back pissed off Hannah. She wanted to have the day to work on him, to get money out of him for a foundation or something she was doing, and that's why he had gone there. And so she, I don't think she was happy. She put up with me all day, for dinner, and then Lawrence insisted that I come back, and so I did. And about, I don't know, it was about 3 or 4. I'd been there all morning and stuff. We had run out of paranormal stuff to talk about, and that's when I really started to get into finding out more about what he was about. I asked him, so many people think that you guys all get together and you captains of industry and movers and shakers, you get together in secret, and then you decide how everything is gonna work, and then
all you Bilderbergers,
you Illuminati, you guys have it all figured out and stuff, and he basically said to me, if you think we could even agree where to meet, let alone when, and you really think that we could come up with a short list of subjects? He said it doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
Now, granted, he was he was a black sheep. He was the dreamer, and I wouldn't say that he was close on the inside like his brother was, but the guy was worth a lot of money. So anyway, we're talking. Oh, I love this, and I asked him. I said, I've been spending more and more time on this new thing, the internet. And I said, I've been doing some research. Was doing some research last night, and your little brother David kept coming up. And how come so many people think he's the Antichrist? And he let out a guffaw, and he lost it. He went apoplectic. They had to, we were patting him on the back. We were trying to get water in him. He was just laughing so hard he couldn't stop and started, coughing and choking. And I thought I killed him. I really did. I thought I freaking killed him. And then, the handler came out and said, your time with Mr. Rockefeller is over. So I went home, and I told Isidore, I said, oh my God, I think I killed the guy with a joke.
Uh-huh.
And man, 2 days later, I think, it just knocked at the door, and this, telegram from Mongo. I got this hand-delivered envelope with a big fatty check in it. Never talked to 1 minute about money. We the subject never came up.
Wow.
And then he turned around and did the same thing the following year.
Oh, cool. Must be a nice problem to have.
Well, I used what little influence I had to help get a lot of money to the Pinelandia Biophysics Lab for them to get some gear and increase their capabilities. And I'm happy that I was able to do that.
Yeah.
Plus, I kind of confirmed in his mind, at the time. Don't forget, we're talking, I think 96 or 97. I forget. I have to look it up. Let's see, 97. At that particular point in time, I'd written the first book, and I just kind of burned out, and I was having to work construction. I had a band, doing all this work, and then to have him come along when he did allowed me to continue, devoting
With the work,
the time with the work, and it led to, I don't know, that and a lot of the media stuff that I do. I'm one of those people that you see all the time, but I'm not very memorable.
Yeah. I don't know about that.
Except for my cowboy hat.
Shifting gears a little bit, on April 16th, 1996, Oprah Winfrey had a mad cow disease show in which she stated she'd never eat another hamburger again. Mm-hmm. Can you tell us about that, the impending lawsuit, and its outcome?
Oh, my God, yeah. Howard Lyman, The Mad Cowboy. Great book, by the way. She heard about this rancher who was mad as hell, and he's not going to take it if it comes. And so he was up in arms about it. And, of course, Oprah at that point had the top daytime, talk show. And when she blurted out that statement, the following morning when she went into the office, there was a lawsuit for $2 billion on her desk from the beef industry. The largest, most powerful lobby in this country you never, ever hear about. Mm-hmm. And they could be behind some of the cases. They could. Mm-hmm. I've got some pretty interesting data the proximity of large industrial ranches where there used to be dozens of small mom and pop ranches. So yeah, poor Oprah. Be careful what you don't wish for.
Yeah.
I just find it's very indicative of the kind of power that the largest income producing sector of agriculture. There's a lot of power that comes along with that. That you know fiscal clout.
Sure.
So you don't. That's why I never say be vegetarian. Don't eat beef. I eat beef. I'm very selective about what beef I eat and how much of it I eat.
Mm-hmm.
But at some point, we are going to have to stop utilizing bovine protein as a part of our diet, our way to get protein. It's so inefficient. It's like almost 500 gallons of water for every pound. Largest source of freshwater pollution, largest source of creation of deserts, biggest reason why we're cutting down the rainforest to make room for more cattle. It's like
What it's doing to the air we breathe.
Yeah, right. Well, and the methane too. One of the largest contributors of ozone depleting gases.
But you mentioned in Stalking the Herd that in L.A. they measured particles of meat in the air.
Oh, that's what most of the smog is. Yeah, in the summer.
Really?
Yep.
So,
restaurants and people cooking meat.
Switching gears, what were the effects of Upton Sinclair's 1906 expose of the Chicago meatpacking industry, The Jungle, and what were the long-lasting results of his controversial novel?
Yeah, another good question. A book that I was forced to read when I was in junior high school, but I soon found myself rereading it. It came out in the early 1900s and was an expose on the meatpacking plants and the rendering plants in Chicago, where all this beef coming from the West would be taken by the Armor Meat Company. What were some of the other ones? The old. There's 6 of them. There's 6 of the old. The Beef Consortium.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, there were no labor laws. There were no, rules and regulations. Children, you could hire children, and I don't know if any of you have ever been to a rendering plant today in a fairly pristine, clean environment. Imagine what it was like, 120 years ago.
Oh my God!
And people would disappear; they wouldn't show up to punch out, and they go in, they couldn't find him, and the only, based on where he was last seen, or where they think he might have been, he fell into a vat of lard, and became part of the product.
Wow!
And that actually happened a number of times. Severed limbs would go into the process. Anyway, the book is pretty horrific, and it the Sherman Antitrust Act, which they tried to pass a few years before The Jungle came out, that was meant to break up the railroads and Standard Oil and the big conglomerates of steel companies, and it wouldn't pass. And then Upton Sinclair came out with The Jungle. It was a runaway success, and they reintroduced the act, and they geared it for breaking up the monopoly by the meat trust, with the 6 meat packing companies, or 4, however many there were, and they won. They got the first antitrust legislation really went through initially as going after the railroads and stuff, but ultimately they went after the beef trust and won. The government did.
Mm-hmm.
So this book was a rallying cry for reforming labor laws and mandating work weeks, and just all the modern workers' rights that have been eroding for the last 35, 40 years. So
5-day work week, 8 hours a day, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And
have to be 16 to
time and a half for
work.
overtime.
Yeah,
exactly. So sometimes good journalism does have an impact. I feel that since I'm in a place where I can say that I'm helping inform and educate people, millions of people, actually, that there's a responsibility that goes along with that, and you try to be as when you say you don't know, and don't pretend you know.
right.
I don't know anything. I suspect a lot of stuff, but until I'm able to really nail some things down definitively and scientifically, most importantly, till I can do that, it's I'm still just as much an amateur and neophyte as the next guy.
So, Chris, we're about an hour and 37 minutes in, so I want to rapid fire some questions at you, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Can you give us in-depth specifics regarding skinwalkers? As one of the only non-native researchers granted access to tribal lands for your research, what have you learned that differs from other researchers? According to your research and tribal folklore, what is a skinwalker?
Well, that's a pretty tall question. Number one, I do tend to shy away from speaking about Native American traditional knowledge. I've been walking a tightrope with the Hopi based on my work around the location of the place of emergence, the most sacred place in North America, basically. The Hopi are the Aboriginal people of North America, and their most sacred site is just upriver in the Little Colorado, just upriver from the Colorado in Grand Canyon. And I did a lot of work identifying the location and attempting to look for other entrances into the underground city that's supposedly there. And I produced a couple little documentaries on it. And the Hopi, they also have a tradition of medicine men who are on the dark side, but it's very difficult to find out about it. The Zunis, they're Hopi's little brothers. The Zuni have a little bit more of a social, sorcery tradition, and also it's mostly referred to as witchcraft. And the whole Yishodolshi Skinwalker it's like a school of medicine knowledge in the witchery way, in the Dene tradition, mostly in Navajo, but also to a lesser degree in the Apache. And based on my research, there are adepts that are they've been passing down, some form of ancient knowledge that allows them to bilocate and lock eyes with somebody, jump in and take over their motor functions, make them talk, make them walk, make them drive a car. They allegedly are able to transform into other animals, most often coyotes, but also birds, ravens, owls. They Well, there's a bunch of it would take too long really to go into all the width and breadth of the knowledge that I've been able to piece together. But I'm convinced that it's a real phenomenon. I spoke with New Mexico law enforcement officers who have had run-ins with skinwalkers. One of them just terrified him. He said this old guy, I think he was between Loop and Indian Wells, somewhere in that area on the Navajo Res. And he was driving along and he saw, it was 2 a.m, 3 a.m. It was a long stretch. And he saw an old man walking on the other side of the road, but walking in the same direction. And so he slowed down, rolled down his window, said, "Hey," probably talked to him in Navajo and said, "Hey, get in here. Let me give you a ride down the road." And he ignored him. He said he was, like an older looking guy, real wiry. He said he looked kind of disheveled, but not untold, something that would make him suspicious. And so the guy just kept ignoring him and kept walking. So he just drove off. And all of a sudden, he feels motion next to him, and he's driving off about 30 miles an hour, and the guy's running right outside his window, looking in at him. And he speeds up, and the guy keeps up with him. And he says he finally veered off, and he got up around 65, 70 miles an hour. The guy was keeping pace with him. Now, this is a cop. This is a state patrolman.
Wow.
So... And there's others too. There's a couple of really good accounts in George Knapp and Colm Kelleher's books, Hunt for the Skinwalker. They did some real good research. I had a Zuni elder tell me about a case that they don't know how they're going to deal with it. At least back at the time, they must have figured something out because they had some sort of skinwalker in custody. And there's some pretty interesting, of course, it's at the very core, you have the real skinwalkers with the ancient knowledge. I'm sure there's a lot of wannabes and people that are charging money to take people out and stuff that claim to be skinwalkers. They're a lot of what they're used for now, I'm pretty sure is for, getting back at people, revenge.
You're right.
Type stuff. That's kind of the impression I get. But man, I'll tell you, you cannot go up to the Navajo Res and start asking questions. I had to go through the res every day. I used to drive for a private high-end tour company, and I'd give day trips from Sedona up to the south rim of the Grand Canyon. I've probably been up there 600, 700 times. I lost track years ago. Did that for 10 years. And I was on the res every day. And we'd stop at the trading post there in Cameron, and I befriended the guy, the head of the fine art gallery in there. He was a really super sweet guy. And he taught me a lot about Native American art and stuff. And his assistant was in there, and he didn't talk much, and he was in his early 20s, probably 24, maybe. And he never looked at me. And one day I went in, and Tony, his boss, wasn't there, and so I asked him, I said, you got these 2 Kachina dolls in the back, the Yishidolshi, and his eyes got big, and he ran out of the store. It was bizarre. And he got in trouble.
Because you mentioned the Kachina dolls?
Because I mentioned the name of the Kachina dolls.
Oh.
It turns out he was like some like a healer in training, someone that does serious, health related healing. So it's kind of like he's the antithesis of the of the dark side.
Oh, I see.
It
Okay.
just freaked him out, and he would never, if he saw me coming, he would always go the other way. He would never look at me either.
Huh. Interesting. Briefly tell us, what is mad cow disease, and how are prion diseases like zombie deer disease in deer and elk transmissible?
Yeah, that's a huge subject. Wow. We don't know a lot about prion disease. It's 1,000, prions are 1,000 times smaller than the smallest virus.
Wow.
It's a simple protein that misfolds into an unnatural shape, and it causes other proteins to misfold. And basically what it does is it starts tearing holes in synaptic and nerve tissue, and interrupting synaptic flow, and you start to lose your memory, you start to lose muscle coordination, and ultimately your body forgets how to tell itself to breathe, or to swallow. So it's a gruesome way to die. It's 100% fatal.
It's always fatal.
It's 100% fatal. It has up to a 30-40 year incubation period. People that were vegetarians for 20 years in England have died from mad cow disease in humans, Creutzfeldt-Jakob's
goodness.
disease. Yeah. So, the history of it, Colm Kelleher, who co-wrote Hunt for the Skinwalker, he's a microbiologist and a very smart guy. He was Bigelow's right-hand, he'd been Bigelow's right-hand man for 20 years plus. He wrote a book that I really recommend to anyone that's interested in potential emerging pandemics, and that's called Brain Trust. In it, he lays out a really good case that the fear of prion disease is what may be driving at least one aspect of the cattle mutilation mystery, and that there is a direct correlation between suspected outbreaks or outbreaks of mad cow disease and subsequent mutilation cases. And the book is excellent, and very few people ever read it. It just went by the wayside. It's a stunning piece of writing, taking all these complex, medical subjects in biology, and making it readable. And plus the history, he traces the history of where prion disease comes from, and he thinks it may have been weaponized and got loose in the environment.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah. That leads into my next question. How many other animal populations are susceptible to spongiform encephalopathy brain diseases, including wild ones?
Well, it's difficult to determine, but I think
like the zombie deer disease and that kind of thing.
Pretty much, it has the same thing, has different names depending on what animal it's in. For deer and elk, which is the earliest form, besides the Kuru disease, which is found in New Guinea,
the laughing disease.
Yeah, yeah, and that's the only naturally occurring example of prion disease in human populations, because they were isolated on that island and they were eating the brains of their ancestors when they died, and they triggered this misfolded protein. Well, this guy named Daniel Guchek, who was like a medical James Bond, he went and studied it to ascertain if it was something that Sidney Gottlieb back at Fort Detrick in the Chemical Corps could mess around with. This is in the late 50s, early 60s. So he brought some diseased brains back, and they started tinkering around with this this very fatal potential bioweapon, I guess. Anyway, they had animals in Fort Collins and animals in, I think, just west of Cheyenne, Wyoming. And it got loose into the deer and elk. And this was back in right around the time of Snippy, 67, 68.
So you think that the deer and the elk were susceptible to it before the cattle were?
Well, it hadn't really appeared in cattle yet. It didn't appear in cattle for another 10 years that we know.
Right.
So yeah, no, it's a whole different thing in cattle. The cattle thing was England. If you visited
hoof and mouth
England,
disease.
well, that came right after it, and they said that's it, and they destroyed every single head of livestock in the English islands. 4.5 million
Wow.
head of cattle, and they burnt them with about 750 to 800 degrees. Prions can survive all the way up to 2,500 degrees.
I was just going to ask you that.
Yeah. And
so when they burned all those livestock, the prions just went all over the place.
Well, they sold the bone ash to 70 countries as fertilizer.
Wow. That was really stupid.
They didn't know.
Yeah.
The prion hadn't been discovered yet. It wasn't until the next year Stanley Prusner wrote the paper that won him the Nobel Prize for Medicine in 1999.
Very interesting.
So anyway, if you want me to kind of summarize,
yeah,
I think it's one of the most likely agendas that humans are involved with in perpetrating animal mutilation deaths. I think it's a combination of fear of mad cow disease and potentially some form of environmental monitoring that's reacting to something else that's environmental monitoring.
Right.
So you heard it here first.
Right. What is the reality of human mutilations? Our audience has been warned this material may not be suitable for all viewers, so don't hold back.
It's the hardest part of so-called mutilation research. There's an absolute lid that's locked down tight within the law enforcement community in this country. We're starting to see cracks in the British. We know that they have a response team that actually goes out if a case like this is reported. Some pretty interesting work is being done by some journalists over there, including examples of photographs, examples of some cases are horrific. It's just, whatever could do that to that girl or that person, it's just inconceivable to me.
Same earmarks of
yeah, exactly the same.
Yeah.
Exactly the same.
How many documented cases have you
very,
heard?
Very few.
Mm-hmm.
A dozen, maybe.
There's one that I seem to remember, but I don't remember the name or exactly where, but it was somewhere in South America, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Does that ring a bell?
Yeah, of course.
Can you tell us about that one?
Yeah, that's a Giraporanga reservoir case, which is down there. I think, not sure. I think it was near either Sao Paulo or Rio. Anyway, they found this guy on a mountaintop, kind of a hilltop, with all the apparent wounds, and an autopsy was done, and the information was inadvertently leaked to a local reporter who contacted an American reporter, Scope Shellhorn, who then did a piece on it. He was able to get a hold of the autopsy reports and all the photographs, and it's pretty interesting. Allegedly, all the upper organs, the heart, the lungs, were taken out of the body through a quarter-sized hole at the bend of the arm, which is very, very unusual. I've never heard of that one.
The inside of the elbow?
Yeah.
Huh.
And then all the lower organs were taken out of the belly button.
Weird.
And I mean, there's other things too, but it is a head scratcher, and I do think that there are real human mutilation cases. I think that they're very rare. We may have seen some in the late 70s, maybe one or two in Idaho. There's the famous one that I forget who claimed the one at White Sands, where the soldier goes over the dune. And
Right.
That's kind of an apocryphal story. That's more of an urban legend, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I've never really seen anything that backs that up, other than people quoting each other. So, I don't know, you know who Bob Ecker is? He used to be the publisher of UFO magazine in the 80s and 90s.
Before, did you say Don Ecker?
Yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Very familiar with him.
Yeah. He's, he spent 3 years trying to get to the bottom of it. And he, much to his credit, and I really don't know what to say about that. It's just it's so horrific. It's even it's almost too much for me, and so I let him republish, or he let me republish the results of his 3-year investigation. And he, you were talking about an ex-homicide detective, I think, right?
Mm-hmm.
In Philly or someplace. And Don's a pretty he's
a no nonsense guy.
He redefines no nonsense sort of guy.
Yeah.
And I like Vicky. I've known, of course, Vicky's some for years. So anyway, if someone like Don Ecker, who's ex-law enforcement, after 3 years just hits into brick wall after brick wall after brick wall, I'm not surprised that I have as well, and others that I know who have looked into it. I have a feeling that it goes on a lot more, but more in an occult sacrificial way.
Mm-hmm. We're just at the 2-hour mark, getting pretty close. I have one other question for you, if you're okay to go over.
Okay.
And then maybe I can ask you the other 30 questions that I have for you next time you come on.
You got your list together.
A Colorado landowner was inspired to return his land to Native Americans 3 years after purchasing it and being haunted by the spirits of its rightful owners / guardians.
Right.
When artist and plumber Rich Snyder purchased a few acres of land on Wild Horse Mesa in 2015, he had no idea what he'd find there. Around the land, he found artifacts of a people that had lived there for thousands of years. Strange arrangements of stones forming fireplaces and chimneys along a hillside, a stone axe, and a rock table he believes was used for slaughtering animals. It turns out this land once belonged to the Ute tribe. What can you tell us about the Ute tribe and this particular case?
It's the Ute.
Ute, that's right.
Yeah, Ute, and it would be the bands of the Southern Mountain Ute. You also have the Ute from Utah up in the Great Basin, and this would be the southern sort of branch of the Ute tribe. The Utes were nomadic, so they didn't build dwellings for the most part. They didn't. They only visited the San Luis Valley during the warmer months. They went down to lower altitudes during the winter. It's really tough to be in 30, 40 below in a teepee wearing moccasins and a breechcloth. It gets a little rough.
I always wondered
you.
how the Kansas Indians did deal with the wintertime here, because it gets pretty fucking cold.
Yeah. Well, it's just a whole different reference points. If that's normal, then that's normal. It's when it gets worse than that it starts to hurt and be abnormal.
Yeah.
So, I don't know. It's
so the Ute tribe was not the original tribe that had inhabited this land.
No. There are 13 different tribes at last count visited the San Luis Valley during the warmer months. The Northern Plains Indians, the Middle Plains Indians, like the Kiowa and the Arapaho, and then the Southern Plains Indians, the Comanche, the Tewa, and others. All those Front Range Indians would go there, including the Crow and the Blackfeet, all the way up to the border there, Canada. They go there, and then the Utes were they lived closest to the valley. They lived in the lower valleys in western Washington, or western Colorado, and around Durango and Mesa Verde and places over in that area. It's much nicer. It's a banana belt area during the winter, and then they would go up high during the summer, but they would only have hunting camps. They wouldn't live there year round. So you had all these tribes, and allegedly it was forbidden to get in fights in the valley. It was kind of a sacred hunting ground place, and the sacred mountain of the east, the most important sacred mountain to the Navajo is Blanca, and that's a huge mountain that guy is looking at from his lot in Wild Horse Mesa. He's got a front row seat to 14,000 foot mountains, all stuck together, and I mean it's also probably one of the most notorious UFO hotspots in the world.
Right.
More sightings over Blanca, all the way back to the 1770s. Allegedly.
So what do you know about him being haunted by the spirits of the rightful owners or guardians?
Well, he's an artist, right?
Mm-hmm.
Artists tend to be more sensitive than the rest of us. And it doesn't surprise me in the least, knowing the area, that spending time in that roaring silence there by himself, it's overpowering.
Mm-hmm.
Some people just can't handle it. And I've seen people with tons of money, great ideas, arrive, and then 6 months they're out of there. 8 months, maybe they'll make it a year. Many are called, few are chosen.
Yeah,
it's really difficult to live there. I mean, you have to drive 60 miles for the nearest 60 plus miles to the nearest supermarket, movie theater, hospital.
Mm-hmm. Not an easy life.
At 7,500 feet.
In elevation?
That's the valley floor.
Oh, wow.
I lived at about 9.
All right. Well, I think we have reached the end of the show. And it turns out that Ivan Ivanovich is the winner of our giveaway. So let's go ahead and
shoot him my email address.
Let's go ahead and get him a copy of Stalking the Herd, your latest book.
Okay.
And you can autograph it for him.
Okay.
And I really appreciate that. And when do you think that you can bring Ray on?
Let's try. If you want to try for next week, we can.
Okay, that sounds good. Let's have Ray Stanford on next week with you. And I am very excited about that.
Yeah. Yeah, he's a handful.
Yeah. I thought you were playing a recording when you first came on. I didn't realize it was on the phone. Yeah.
It's saying, yeah, I'll do it. Sure.
Cool.
Tell me where. Tell me when. Yeah, I'm still a little bit in La La Land. I had a heart procedure yesterday.
Oh, goodness.
Pardon my kind of laxness here, sort of trailing off. Yeah, I had a cardiac conversion, I think they call it. It's like they reboot your heart.
Oh, I hope everything turned out okay.
It did, but I haven't got much sleep, so I'm pretty much delirious.
Yeah, me too. I've been up for far too long. Well, I'll let me go, and we'll see you next week.
Okay. All right. Well,
okay.
Send me Yvonne's contact information, please, and
I sure will.
I'll get that right out to him.
All righty. Thanks very much, Chris.
Okay, man.
We'll see you next time.